Welcome back to My Hot Kitchen. I'm Wendy, and our little cooking show is all about creating a romantic date night at home, starting with a homemade restaurant-style dinner that you share with your sweetie. On this week's menu, we'll be having a pork tenderloin in a Dijon pretzel crust. On the side, red potatoes in white wine and a little steamed asparagus. For dessert, a little butterscotch apple crispy. So let's get started on that butterscotch first. You're gonna need to take about 2 tablespoons of butter and melt it over medium-low heat. As the butter's melting, you can go ahead and add 1/4 cup of firmly packed brown sugar. I recommend using a nice dark brown sugar for this particular recipe. I feel that the dark brown sugar, instead of light brown sugar, imparts a better butterscotchy flavor. So you just want to get these all combined together. Get the butter all melted and the brown sugar all dissolved in it. Just like that. Leave it on a medium-low heat and allow it 5 to 10 minutes to start to bubble. And while that gets going, you can start working on the tenderloin breading. So I've got about 1 cup of pretzels here, and they are going to make the most wonderful breading. Just going to pop these in a food processor here and pulse them. To a fine meal. Take that out and drop it in over here. And since this is a breading, you're going to want to make sure it tastes right. So take a little taste. And assess the saltiness. If it doesn't taste really salty to you, you're going to need to add some salt, because there's only a thin little coating of the breading on the pork tenderloin. So I'm just going to free pour a little salt in here, probably about 1/4 teaspoon or so. And just toss it together here real quick. One more little taste here. Perfect. Now let's move on to the other part. To make the breading stick, you're going to need some wet ingredients. So I have 1/8 cup here of Dijon mustard, and about 1/4 cup of sour cream. To that, I'm going to add the white of 1 egg. Crack my eggshell carefully here. And allow the white to pour off. Just need the white for the sticking power that it provides. The yolk you're going to need for the crust of the apple crispy. So whisk these together until you have one smooth consistency. That's perfect right there. Now take your tenderloin, roll it in this goopy, moist stuff, this sour cream and mustard and egg white. Get it all nice and coated and loved up. And then roll it in the crumbs. Coat it entirely. A nice thick crust on there. Once you're satisfied with your coating, go ahead and stick it in a baking pan. I recommend finding a pan that sort of squishes it at the ends so that it plumps up. That way you get nice sized tenderloin slices. Add a little more crumbing on top here. I see some meat sticking through, so I'm going to cover that up. Then this is ready to go in the oven, after I give my hands a little wash. So I have my oven set at 375 degrees. The roast is about 1 pound. So it's going to take anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes. Now I know that's quite the range, but it's going to depend on your oven and the type of tenderloin that you're using and all that jazz. So let's go back to this butterscotch sauce. I'm whisking it in order to keep the brown sugar and butter all combined. But this is what you're looking for. You're looking for a nice layer of bubbles to form across the entire surface, and you're looking for your, like I said, butter and brown sugar to be completely combined together. Now it's time to add some heavy cream to this. A half cup of delicious heavy cream. Just gonna add it right in there, making sure to scrape out the bowl because the heavy cream is so thick that it will stick. And you really wanna make sure you get it all in there for the best result. Now, whisk the heavy cream, the butter, the brown sugar together until you have one smooth texture. It should be velvety and a nice dark caramely golden brown. There we go. That's the sort of texture that we're looking for. No more little lumps, just one smooth sauce. So bring this up to a low boil and let it go for about 10 minutes to find itself. You will want to whisk it periodically while it cooks and scrape down the sides of the pan for the optimal result. Now let's talk about the red potatoes and white wine. So you're going to need to take about a tablespoon or so of butter and melt it in a saute pan first. You want to get it all good and happy. At this point, you just want the pan to be on kind of a medium temperature, just enough to melt the butter and make it bubble, but not enough to brown the butter necessarily. Now add your red potatoes. In this instance, I went ahead and sliced them in half, and I'm going to put them sliced side down in the butter first. Let them soak it all up. In a couple minutes, we'll toss some more love into it. Ooh, the butterscotch is progressing very nicely. I gotta tell you, this is an amazing sauce. You're gonna wanna eat it all with a spoon. All right, back to the potatoes. Just gonna give these a little toss here and get them all coated in the butter. Yeah, they're kind of awkward when they're shaped like that, but they do just fine. Toss about a clove's worth of chopped up garlic and a nice pinch of fresh parsley, maybe like a teaspoon or so. Toss it up. Shake a nice amount of salt and pepper over it, keeping the seasonings real simple, and you'll see why when it's all done. Turn these back over and let this flat side get good and brown. So while all this stuff gets going on over here, I'm gonna get cleaned up over here and get ready to make the apple crispy. So tasty. So I'm just chopping up my Pink Lady apple here. I love Pink Lady apples. They have a nice tartness and a good body to them. Do a really good job in baking. I just chopped it up in a nice little chunks. You don't really have to get too fussy about what size your chunks are. And the butterscotch has been simmering for about 10 minutes, so it's time to take it off the heat and let it start cooling down a little bit. While that does its thing, I'm gonna go ahead and get the topping ready. Have a half cup here white sugar, and about a half cup of flour, about a half teaspoon of baking powder, and that egg yolk. Need a spatula. Okay. Get it all scraped in there. You want every little precious drop of that egg yolk in the crust. And start milling it up with your fingers. Mill it until you have a crumbly, yummy texture. And if you're not seeing a real crumbly texture come together, it just means you need a little more moisture in there. So add it in, maybe a teaspoon or so at a time. Continue milling it together until you get that crumbly texture. There we go. Oh, that's going to be delicious. Now get it all scraped off your fingers here because you're going to want that on the crusty, not in the bottom of your sink. Or on the crispy. Inevitably, some of it's going to end up in the sink though. Let's take a look at these potatoes here. Ooh, we've got a nice, rich caramelized color on the bottoms. I'm gonna flip them over and make sure the skin side gets a little crispy love too. And then back over here. Let's work on finishing off the flavor profile of the butterscotch first. So you're gonna need a couple things. A little bit of vanilla extract and a little bit of salt. And this is totally one of those season it to taste kind of deals. Give the butterscotch a little taste, assess its stickiness. Really good, but it's not butterscotch yet. You're gonna need to add a couple drops of vanilla extract and a couple shakes of salt. Add it in very small amounts, tasting between each step. Wow, with each addition of vanilla and salt, you get closer and closer to that classic butterscotch flavor. This is totally one of those things that I do probably 3 or 4 times to find that perfect flavor. It's really fun how it progresses. So creamy, so rich. Just that little hint of salt on the background. Absolutely incredible. Now, I'm going to be making the crispy in 2 cute little dishes since there's just 2 of us. We'll each have our own individual. Take about half the apple, splitting it. And then I'm going to pour a whole lot of this awesome butterscotch sauce over the apples. I'm going to reserve just enough to garnish it when we sit down to eat it. Give it a loving little toss. Get them all coated and loved up in the butterscotch goodness. While you're at it, toss in just a pinch of flour to each pot. That's going to help the apples to set up and not run. You want to get the flour to coat all the surfaces of the apples. Flatten them out, kind of squish them and compact them. And then sprinkle on your crumb topping. And bury the little apples in their dishes. And then let's get these in the oven. So we're just gonna slide these on in right above the tenderloin roast. They're gonna take about 30 minutes and they can absolutely cook in there together. And one little trick for making the crust extra crispy is that when they're done, you just prop the door open a little bit and let them cool down in the oven. Now let's go back to these potatoes here. I'm gonna give them another little toss. And it's time to move to step 2, which entails adding a half cup of white wine into the pan and putting a lid over it, and letting them sort of poach. Let's bring it in a small saucepan here because another part of the roast is going to be a delicious red wine mushroom gravy sauce to go over the top of it. So to make that, you're going to need to start about a half tablespoon of butter melting. And it's okay if the pan's a little hot like that because we're going to make it into a brown roux with about a half tablespoon of flour. So stir these two lovely ingredients together. Dissolve the flour in the butter and take it to a nice dark brown color. Use medium-low heat, by the way. Well, that is a nice dark brown, rich color. Just the sort of flavor foundation you're going to want for this red wine mushroom sauce. So let's bring in a half cup of red wine. There we go. And add the mushrooms. I have about approximately a cup's worth of chopped up mushrooms. Get those all in there. Get them nice and happy. And then we're going to need to cover it with a lid. And just bring that up to a boil and drop it down to a simmer, and we'll season it up at the end. Let's take a look at these potatoes here. Most of the wine has soaked up and cooked out. Now we are going to need to add a little bit more wine back into here because we're going to use it to cook off the asparagus. So I'm just going to drop a little bit in there. Really just looking for the steam. Add some asparagus stalks, just the tender tips. And just sort of put them on top here. Hit it with a little salt and pepper. Make sure it's all good and loved up. Put the lid back on. And simmer it until the asparagus has turned a bright green color. And let's take a look at the mushroom sauce here. Brought up to a nice boil. And now I'm going to let it do its simmering with the lid off so that the wine can evaporate out and the sauce can thicken nicely. So let's go check on the roast. I bet it's done. It smells very nice in here. Now the only way to truly know if your roast is done in this instance is if it reaches an internal temperature of 160 degrees. In the meantime, it can just set off to the side and cool off. And I'm going to go ahead and reset my Crispies in here on a lower shelf. Grab the cutting board and knife, which I'm going to need in just a moment to chop or slice the pork tenderloin in nice little medallions. Give it to me. There we go. Let's take a look at the sauce over here. It's almost all cooked down. Now it's time to season it up. Let's take a little taste of it right off the bat so that you know where you're starting from. Really good, but it definitely needs some salt and pepper to bring it out of its shell. So you're probably gonna need about a quarter teaspoon of salt and a little black pepper to taste. With the mushrooms and the complexity of the red wine working together, you're really not going to need much more than that. That's delicious right there. And let's take a look in here. Beautiful. We've achieved a nice bright color on the asparagus. It's definitely cooked but not soggy. Let's be ready to go when we're ready to plate. Now let's see if this is cool enough to work with. Definitely. If it's cool enough to handle, it's definitely cool enough to slice. It's always good to let the juices pull back into the roast by allowing it a few minutes to cool. So I'm just going to slide my knife in here, and I'm actually going to cut this nice little tenderloin on a bias cut, going for slices between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. I'm doing the bias cut because it makes a little bit larger surface space to the slice, making it look like there is more meat. You want to use a nice sharp knife for this job so that it cuts right through the coating without ripping it off the meat. And you might as well just slice the whole thing up while you're at it. Now let's go check on the crispy before we get all excited about plating. Oh, very nice. You want to see a nice little bubbling around the outside. That tells you that the apples are cooked and the filling is done. So we're going to turn off the oven. And now time for the magical trick that makes the topping very crunchy and crispy. Leave the door open a crack and allow the moisture to evaporate out as it cools. Now with that done, we can focus in on dinner. I'm going to start by grabbing out the asparagus in here. Putting those on the plate. You're going to love the way the asparagus works against the richness of the roast and the sauce and the potatoes and all that. Be a nice bright complement to the flavor. And back to the potatoes. Drop another little half tablespoon of butter in there. And just give them a nice little loving coat. It's going to add a little bit of shine, a little extra flavor, and just generally make them taste awesome. And once you've got them all coated, go ahead and plop them on the plate too. Nice yummy big bites of potato. Who doesn't love meat and potatoes? In here and grab a few of these nice yummy slices. Kind of fan them out scallop style like that. Most tenderloin roasts are a little under a pound each, which makes it just about the perfect portion. Hit it with a little bit of this beautiful mushroom sauce right across the top. A little sprinkle of some green herbs to brighten it up. There you go. So with some scratch ingredients, a whole lot of love and a little flair, you just whipped up a dinner to share with your sweetie that could have easily cost you 50 bucks if you went out. So pair this up with a nice soft red wine. I'd recommend a Pinot Noir or perhaps some Merlot. Now call in your sweetie. Honey! Hey!
Yum!
Look.
Wow, does that look good?
Hi, handsome.
So do you. You look good too. Okay. Alright. Date night dinner at home.
It's our night.
Wow.
Pork tenderloin going on with a nice rich mushroom sauce on top.
Oh my goodness. This is such a hot kitchen.
So thanks for joining me in my hot kitchen tonight. Have fun turning up the heat in your kitchen, and I'll see you next week. Night night. Pet the kitties.